So a while back, I did a video about one of the major characters in the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline, Sammy Emily. The video, called Charlie, From Protagonist to Plot Device, covered her introduction and decline in the book series that she was supposed to be the star of. Like my old baby video, the video wasn't perfect. Not only did it leave some important pieces out, but it was also recorded with an AI voice. So today I will be redoing that video, including more details such as her role in the games, and discussing how Fnaf handled its first real character, and its shot at writing the Fnaf storyline into a cohesive novelization. Now, I will be using some of that video's script for some portions of this, not out of laziness, I promise, but because some of it was pretty on point and I don't want to lose that paraphrasing. So, who is Sammy Emily? Sammy Emily is the daughter of Henry Emily, the former owner of Freddy's and former business partner of William Afton, the Purple Man and child murderer. Charlie's personality depends greatly on the book she's in, but as depicted in her first iteration, she's a young woman trying to move on from a traumatic past. Having lost her twin brother, her father, her family, and raised by an aunt who prioritized Charlie's independence over anything else, Charlie ends up stumbling into the secrets of the past when she visits her old friends in her hometown. She is smart and resourceful, but has a reckless streak. Charlie is pretty much a standard protagonist, but there are plenty of little things that make her likable. The Silver Eyes, the first book in the series, is pretty much a standard and safe Fnaf book. It's a would-be novelization of the first 3 games that was Fnaf's first step into transmedia. It was where we learned the name of the killer, where we got our first real human characters, and real answers about some of the Fnaf lore, even though it was assured that it wasn't entirely canon. In fact, at the time, Scott said that the events were technically real but told in a different way, which makes sense when The Silver Eyes pretty much retells the events of William's Springlock accident and transformation into Springtrap, except with these characters there instead of the ghost children. This is not carried through with the Twisted Ones in the Fourth Closet, though elements of those books did reflect into Fnaf canon. I'll get into that later. Charlie is intrinsically linked to these books because while her name is given in the games, she has no presence in them. She was pretty much a name stuck on a familiar face with no established character or story before Pizzeria Simulator. These books are where she was at her most complete, and that's why we will be looking at them so deeply. I will make this a quick recap. Charlie meets back up with her friends, and they find their way into a closed Freddy's. There they run across and become the targets of William Afton, disguised as a security guard named Dave Miller, and also become the prey to confused animatronics. Charlie learns the truth about what happened at Freddy's and is able to use her knowledge of Springlock suits to set off a failure in William's suit, causing him to be killed and dragged away by the animatronics. The book ends on a hopeful note with Charlie preparing to move on from Freddy's. While the book is pretty by the numbers, it does portray Charlie rather well. In fact, I would say that it is the characters that drive the book. Some more than others, such as Charlie. Like I said earlier, she's resourceful but not too resourceful, and she has an edge of a reckless streak. There are moments in the book where she puts herself on the line for an idea, but they at least tend to make rational sense. She's pretty much one of the only characters in the book who reads like a person and not just a horror protagonist. There is a sort of sadness that surrounds her, likely because when we see her in the book, she is directly confronting her tragic past. You get the feeling that Charlie's been in a state of repression for years and is finally getting the chance to ask these questions she's been holding back. Her arc isn't just to discover her past and end up stopping Afton in the process, it's also to come to terms with what happened, which she seems to have done by the end of the book. She knows what was kept from her, and she gets some amount of closure about Freddy's. One element of this is with her relationship with love interest John. I will go deeper into their relationship in a later section, but throughout The Silver Eyes, the two meet up and immediately have a rather passionless but sweet attraction to one another. However, at the end of the book, Charlie comes to the mature decision to not pursue a relationship with him because she knows he will always remind her of Freddy's. Here's a quote. The Silver Eyes, page 260. "Maybe," she said. She could not look at him. It wasn't the answer he wanted, she knew that, but she could not give him what he wanted. What could she say by way of explanation? It's not you. It's the weight we both bear. It's too much. When you are here, I can't ignore it. She did not look at him. I mean, of course John would remind her of the past. But this is still a bold decision for the book to take, and I'm all behind that. Leaving it open is a pretty good compromise and a much more nuanced take than just having them be in love. And so I don't have to introduce them later, here's Charlie's friends. John, the love interest. Jessica is Charlie's best friend and closest confidant. She's labeled as being fashion-oriented, but she's actually more multifaceted than that. She becomes Charlie's closest confidant in the second book and even a protagonist in the third, which is a good thing because she is arguably the most consistent character in the book series. Marla is the mom of the group. She has a brother who appears as the kid of the group in the first book, but then he doesn't appear again. Lamar is sort of the straight man, but he's written out after the first book. They literally just say, Lamar called, he's never coming back. Carlton is the comic relief and is the most important character in the trilogy, and no, I am not kidding. And I will discuss that another time. To be honest, when I heard that The Silver Eyes was going to be about the daughter of some guy and her teenage friends discovering the spooky secrets behind Freddy's, I was disinterested. At the same time, there was a slew of young adult novels with these flatline female protagonist teens, and I was just not feeling it. But much to my surprise, The Silver Eyes was actually a pretty decent book. I don't think it's a great book, as it sidelines the animatronics for a lot of fluff stuff, but it isn't a bad book. As safe as The Silver Eyes is, it's kind of bland, but it does work. The characters stay consistent, the themes hold up, it recontextualizes some of what we know about Freddy's, and then it's over before it overstays its welcome. This should have been a standalone book, because Charlie's story is pretty much done by the end of it. Whoever was behind the Twisted Ones either never read The Silver Eyes or just didn't understand the basic concept of keeping a character on track. Because this new main character is a real step down from the last one. She's much more unlikable. She makes stupid decisions that don't make any sense just to further the plot. She acts pretty squirrely. She's dripping in suffering over her tragic backstory. She has none of the nuance that Charlie had or any of the charm. Her name is also Charlie Emily. Jokes aside, Charlie goes through a massive character change off-screen. A relatively well-put-together young woman who has some baggage but a good head on her shoulders is turned into someone who can barely function on her own. Charlie Emily, the now severely angst-ridden teen, spends all of her time obsessing about her past. Remember that whole part about her trying to move on? Gone! Charlie is now so consumed by the past and discovering more about it that it absorbs her entire character. Her somewhat reckless but mostly rational behavior is replaced by having little to no self-control with reckless abandon, putting herself repeatedly in stupid situations for answers, when in The Silver Eyes she might have had a better plan. She has decided to drive full force into going into college beside Hurricane and studying robotics. She's so set on this goal that she starts sleeping in her car and begging to get in. She is so distracted with the mystery of her brother, which, by the way, has a very unsatisfactory ending. Spoiler alert, he never appears and her obsession with a door doesn't lead to anything. That part about her and John not dating because she's afraid it'll always remind her of the past? Forget that, they're dating now. The book depicts their date as rather uncomfortable, too. It gives a distinct impression that Charlie really doesn't want to be there. She thinks about her twin brother the whole time. She feels weird. Likely because she's thinking about her brother while dating a man who looks like he could be her brother. And then she lies to Jessica about it being okay. The graphic novel seems to fix this by showing Charlie and John are actually having a good time, but I don't think that's what the initial scene was going for. At least it didn't read like that. Also, on second thought, they're not dating. They go out once and then they're exchanging I love yous. Recapping the Twisted Ones is hard because it's less of a story and more of a clump of moments vaguely resembling a story. In the shortest way I can describe it, in a script that I'm already taking from my last video because I don't want to talk about it again, Charlie is haunted by images of a door and animatronics are popping up around the city and killing people who look like her. These animatronics have magic little illusion discs in them that make people hallucinate and see what they think they should see, or what the user wants them to see, and it sort of flip-flops back and forth on how they work, other than saying that they're sound-based. I have thoroughly torn these apart in my Eleanor video, but I think they're nothing more than a writing crutch myself. Anyway, the animatronics bury themselves underground, and people know where they are, but they don't do anything. There's a pizzeria built underneath Charlie's house, no pizzaplex required. There's also a giant cave with a waterfall, and Springtrap runs in and is like, "This suit burns better." and leaves. In case you haven't seen the Simpsons episode, the joke is that it's an unneededly vague and convoluted pronoun game. Charlie finds a door and believes Sammy's in it, and John convinces her to leave without seeing what's inside. Then she rather suddenly is eaten by Freddy, everyone thinks she's dead, and then Charlie's sensual doppelganger rolls up outside the diner where they're eating and the book ends. That summary is exactly what it feels like to read The Twisted Ones. It's a mess. I know I have spoken ill of The Fourth Closet, but this book is where the story really starts to ooze all sorts of funk. Nobody else looks good either. All her friends suddenly come off as pretty apathetic and out of touch with what's going on. Clay Burke, the police chief and father of Carlton, who was present during the Silver Eyes, suddenly becomes completely incompetent. Afton pretty much pops in for 2 seconds and wanders off again. I can't stress this part enough. Afton literally appears for only a few minutes, and they try to suggest that Charlie and Jessica visiting his body set him free, even though there's so much of that just doesn't really hold up under any scrutiny. The ending is especially steaming. Without any build-up, Charlie is suddenly killed off. Except you know she's not really dead. So it's frustrating when the story effectively jumps ahead to her friends hanging out, chatting about her sudden death. As nutty as Charlie acted in this book, she was pretty much the one driving it. Without her, everyone just calls it a day and goes and eats a sandwich. This book butchered Charlie, and the rest of the cast, really. I don't mind the aspect of Charlie still dealing with trauma, or even the frustration of the situation. But you don't have to make her a completely different character. And you could have had all of this flow together better. Here, let me give a little example. So these animatronic monsters are popping up around town and killing people who look like Charlie. So what's the plan here? Should they set up a sting operation? Well, they see where the things are buried. Should they get Clay to try to dig them up, and then maybe the animatronics go haywire when they're disturbed, so they have to figure out another plan? No, actually the plan is Charlie's going to go figure out where they're going to pop up next, and go there alone at night to get herself killed? I don't know. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. There's other ways that you can get her alone. You don't have to do this. Also, yeah, the pizzeria built under her house is just a little strange. If I ever do a deeper dive on the Twisted Ones, I won't. I don't think I have to. Let's move on to the next book. Before I continue, I want to reiterate that while I give The Fourth Closet such a hard time, and I think there's some baffling decisions in it, I think The Twisted Ones does Charlie's character more dirty. Though The Fourth Closet doesn't do much better. Instead of being about Charlie, The Fourth Closet is a mess of ideas and themes poorly strung together. To clarify how disjointed it is, there are 2 main leads, one of them switches to another character halfway through, 2 climaxes, technically, and Charlie, who is again supposed to be the main character, does not defeat William Afton or save the children's souls. She just sits around weak throughout half the book before having a long exposition dump with baby and then dying. Again. The main characters are now John, who is obsessed with Charlie's death but acts a little weird throughout the entire book, and Jessica, though halfway through Carlton replaces John. Anyway, Charlie's friends are trying to investigate the mysterious woman who claims to be Charlie, but everyone knows she isn't. Other stuff happens, like with Clay, but there's a lot of running around mostly. Eventually, they find out that Charlie's aunt hid her in a trunk in the house, and she is dropped back into the story, but she is no longer a character. No, while Charlie's character is slightly better than in the Twisted Ones, it is only because she has fully transformed into a plot device. She spends a good portion of the book just sitting around until a character needs her for something. She is the thing that John wants, and the mystery everyone else is trying to figure out. She has a non-existent rivalry with Baby. There's a shocking twist, and then she dies again. And maybe comes back at the end of the book. See, the novel is sort of vague with it, but the graphic novel makes it very clear that that is a Charlie. A different Charlie, maybe. Maybe Charlie in adult Charlie's body. Maybe they fused into a new body. We don't know what's going on in her head, but it's not like the book cares. Also, let me talk about Sammy, Charlie's brother who drives the Twisted One and whose death drives the Silver Eyes. A child whose death must have been reported and known by at least some of the players, Clay Burke, and for some reason everyone kind of forgets which child got snatched by William. Have you ever listened to Harry Potter and What Looks Like a Portrait of a Pile of Ash? It's an AI-generated Harry Potter short, Towards the end of the short, the AI randomly says something along the lines of, the Dursleys never came to Hogwarts, and they weren't about to, in Harry Potter and the Portrait of Ash. This is pretty much the same way the book treats Sammy. After mentioning him frequently for 2 books, it's just like, he's alive, but you're never gonna see him. And I mean, Baby, pretty much says that to Charlie. The only reason this bothers me is because half of Charlie's character arc hinged on this long-lost brother. Not only did she not get closure, but the audience got invested in nothing. The book cares about more important things, like the sizable info dump where Baby reveals that Charlie is not a person. And by that I mean, her feelings are only caused by Henry's feelings. She and Baby are constructs of Henry's feelings. And then they go into how much Henry, the recently proclaimed voice of reason, suffered and how Charlie's existence was a mistake at his hands. Henry's trauma is valid and sympathetic. Charlie's trauma is just a mistake. She just came out weird. I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but when you sit in an info dump long enough, you start picking apart the words. Now, you might not know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do, though. Remember I said that Sammy is alive? Yes, that is due to the twist. The twist that Charlie's character was thrown away for. The twist that was implemented so that technically the games and books could maybe exist in the same universe. A bad, bad twist that has now led to the game's story and characters constantly being questioned. Yes, the Charlie being a robot twist. And what's so horrible about it isn't actually Charlie being a robot. I have seen shows and books reveal a character as a robot and still do alright with them. Her being a robot isn't a problem. Her being a robot being a plot device just so you can blur the lines between this and the games, because technically Charlie could still be the puppet, and being a big twist to explain all the really dumb parts of the books, like the fake death and Springtrap meeting Charlie for a reason, because it's not like William was shown to have unhealthy attachments or anything. And now, like underground pizzerias and darling female lackeys, this too has invaded the games, as whether or you believe Gregbot or not, the secret in SB hints that someone is a robot. Maybe, likely, and the problem isn't just someone is a robot, it is that they, like Charlie, might just be used as a plot device or a tool of some kind, abandoning any of their character relevance and then throwing them away once their use has been used up. Imagine if the big twist at the end of the Twisted Ones was that Charlie is a robot, and then the fourth closet is about her recovery and coming to terms with it while the new and threatening pizzeria opens and Springtrap is on the loose. You could still get your plot twist, but now it serves the character. And the only thing worse than the plot twist is the awful reveal that comes with it. You know what it is? It's not Charlie being a robot. It's the fact that she was brought to life by Henry's magic tears. I am not kidding. Henry didn't even use her doll. Baby confirms he bought a doll at the Dollar General and wept into it with all his sadness and brought it to life, and then used that to power his robots. But I suppose this makes sense. Someone once said that tears, when in the right circumstances, can hold a power so strong that it's like magic. I think it was one of the dolphins from the animated Titanic movie. I heard people say that this is a result of Agony, but here's the thing. What is Agony? The books and games, well, Agony isn't mentioned in the games, seem to suggest that when someone dies, their pain may live on. This isn't far from something like an Onryo. Have you ever seen The Grudge or Ju-on? She's an Onryo. Basically, a soul infects a place after death. It's the basic idea of a haunting. How Henry does this alive baffles me, and maybe he's like a demigod. Charlie is not the victim. Charlie is as treated by the plot, not even a person. She is a tool. She is the thing Henry cries about. She is the reason her family fell apart. She is the reason Afton's attacking the city. She is the thing John laments about. She is the MacGuffin of her own universe. She has turned from a character into an object, one that is just moved around from place to place. There's just so many layers to this too. Like, Charlie remembers Sammy being captured because Henry implanted memories into her. So does that mean that he recorded a false memory of Sammy being kidnapped, just so she would remember it? And that she's not even possessed by the real Charlie, but is supposedly just a sentient creation? Not to mention, after Henry's death, her aunt was forced to take up the task of swapping out her bodies every couple of years, apparently never intending to tell Charlie this. It's amazing because for this to work, this means that Henry created a robot that breathes, cries, heals itself, possibly grows hair, bleeds, and bleeds monthly, and that she never had any significant health issues or ever went to a dentist because x-rays would have likely detected the fact that she isn't a real human. And if she's using illusion discs, then she's the only creation that doesn't cause symptoms from the illusion, somehow, as an illusion disc is said to cause things like headaches, dizziness, and nausea, or general symptoms around those. And before I forget, let me also talk about some of the ways the Charlie robot thing was foreshadowed. The hood of her car bent when she sat on it. Yeah, so does mine. I have a 20-year-old car and only weigh about 100 pounds, so go figure. Everyone describes her as odd, or weird. Well, of course they do. Everyone in this town has half a brain cell and swaps traits in knowledge and ability depending on what the plot demands. Of course, Charlie, the one who was traumatized by her father's death and grew up in a stifling household, would be the one who's weird. The Fourth Closet graphic novel implies that Sammy doesn't know he has a sister at all. I don't need to reiterate the gymnastics that would have to happen for Sammy to be completely oblivious to everything. It would make more sense if she said that at least he knows that his sister died. The lengths gone through to write out this character. It's kind of like the whole writing out everyone's wife thing. Also, the dates are weird. One thing in particular, Charlie's birth date on the tombstone is different to the one implied to the first book, which would mean that there was a significant gap between her death and Henry's magic tears, and that would technically mean that she might be quite a bit younger than John. But this is all small potatoes. It's one thing to take away a character's humanity and an entirely different one to stop treating them like a human. And remember, these books were effectively good enough, and Charlie's character was good enough that Scott wrote her into an intrinsic role in the game series. One of the most important things about writing a story is to make sure that your readers cannot see the strings. That they can't see where you're moving your dolls around and setting up the shots. In this case, we can see every jerk of the author's hand. Likely because, and I can't prove it, but I don't think the same author wrote every book. I know what it says on the books. But that would explain why the voice of the book and behavior of the characters and the writing style itself changes so much in between them. Ghostwriting is extremely common. To have someone writing a book whose name never appears on the book happens all the time. But let's talk more about the games. After no hints or suggestions of her or Henry, Charlie is suddenly revealed to be the puppet in Pizzeria Simulator's ending. To no consequence. So, I have videos upon videos discussing the evidence that the puppet was originally not Charlie. The only thing that I'll bring up now, because I don't want to get into it, is that the minigame of Charlie's death in Pizzeria Simulator is a remake of a minigame in Fnaf 2 that shows a child who was hinted to be the puppet and who was killed outside. In that minigame, it spells out "Save him," revealing that the crying child who was killed outside was initially male. It was someone else. And nowhere is that more apparent than how little Charlie and the puppet relate to each other. Charlie doesn't even save the kids in the books, that's Carlton. Charlie has no connection to the ghost children. The puppet had no established personality, and still kinda doesn't. It really just is a name slapped onto a body 2 seconds before it burns up in a fire. The only reason Charlie is the puppet is so that Henry has a reason to be there, and all Henry does is take a speech away from Michael Afton, the character who actually should have given it. And here's the thing I need to stress. While I think there was a retcon with the puppet, because I know that at least the bite of 87-83 was retconned, I don't actually mind Charlie being the puppet. I actually like the Silver Eyes Charlie enough that I could be okay with this decision. If it wasn't just a name reveal and then off to the lockers with you, Nessie. My problem is how pointless it is. It is literally just a name drop to advertise the books. Remember that character? No? Well, go read the books. Maybe they'll tell you more about who the puppet could have been. Spoiler alert, it really doesn't, because Book Charlie isn't the real Charlie anyways. It's like pulling teeth to get characterization from anyone who isn't William Afton, or possibly Henry. This is just such a disservice to both characters. And I know this is a random place to do it, but let's talk about Charlie's relationship with John, because I forgot to earlier. Charlie's relationship with John is just so poorly handled that it's downright embarrassing. This is majorly caused by the fact that John himself has very little personality outside of good boyfriend material for Charlie, but their relationship has little passion. In the Silver Eyes, there's a sort of flirtation between the two, but John stands more as a supporting role to Charlie, helping her get through this trauma of discovering her past, Something that Charlie accepts so readily that it becomes apparent that it's something she needs. She needs someone who's able to support her and help her through these trying times. That mature decision at the end that I gave kudos to, and them going along and dating anyways, is not what I have a problem with. I think they should have addressed Charlie's feelings, but that aside, Charlie and John just feel like Barbie and Ken dolls bounced around beside each other in the Twisted Ones. John is pretty useless when he's not coming in to be the strong one for Charlie, so she will be loved. Then she dies, and John drops the L-bomb. Oof. And in the fourth closet, they address it in such an awkward way. Everything between these two feels kind of weird. Not in the young love way, but in a secondhand embarrassment kind of way. The fourth closet, having a semi-love triangle with Baby crushing on John and even kissing him, is both juvenile and raises alarming questions when paired with the unknown Charlie at the end of the book. John pretty much stumbles around fixated on Charlie throughout the whole thing. He's the robot here, so unable to function without his primary directive that he comes off off-putting. And let's address the Orville elephant in the room. John looks like, and in the third book, acts like Charlie's father, Henry. This is pretty uncomfortable, especially when paired up with the times they lean into infantilizing Charlie. It's clear she has daddy issues, and making her love interest a surrogate to him is, downright uncomfortable. But FNAF's not about romance. Well, then don't put it in. The book series would have been leagues better if it was just Charlie and her friends doing stuff. Especially Jessica, who carries so much of the fourth closet that it isn't even funny. From all of this, you may think that I hate Charlie. But I don't. I really like Charlie. I think her initial story was very compelling. I like the intelligence mixed with recklessness. She's a character who's willing to push the limits but understands why she shouldn't. I just can't stop thinking about what Charlie could have been if she wasn't batted around and tossed aside. Like, let's do some quick math. Charlie's is, 18 during the later trilogy, and it's either 1995 or 1996. I can't remember, and it's close enough that I don't want to look it up. We don't know what year Security Breach takes place in, but they have things like iPads and technology we have today. Since FNAF's universe has always had more advanced robots for the actual year, we could maybe assume that this is 2021 in a world where robots are more commonplace. Taking this into account, Charlie would be a spry 43, not just young enough to still be a viable character in FNAF, but also old enough to have a family of her own. And old enough to be, let's say, Vanessa's mother. I'm not saying that's the actual route I would go in or anything like that, but I am saying that if left alone, Charlie could have returned as a character in the future, no problem. Charlie started off as a good character and was ruined by the same thing that caused the Twisted Ones in the fourth closet to suffer. A lack of a cohesive narrative and a clear indication of where the story wanted to go. And I wouldn't be saying any of this if I didn't see that initial potential. I take writing very seriously, and I hate to see that wasted opportunity, especially when you can see what the problem was. In this case, likely a sudden demand for 2 more books and a need to stretch Charlie's character in a way that was unnatural. And her addition in the games didn't help, because it didn't change anything. Charlie Emily isn't just a protagonist turned plot device. She feels like an idea that wasn't even wanted, passed round while other characters took over. I wrote a rewrite of the Twisted Ones, but I'm going to do a version with a voiceover read instead of an AI, so you might want to wait and check that out when it's done. I'm also planning on doing a video about Charlie's friends, so that's neat. All in all, I think Charlie is a good example of the problem with FNAF storytelling. It becomes so distracted with new ideas that it's willing to break apart what it has established to throw itself into a new idea without thinking of the consequences, or how that will affect the rest of the story or the experience as a whole. Rest in peace, Charlie Emily. You were taken from us too soon. Well, obviously not soon enough, but...